Hey guys, so this video today is about allergies. It's obviously one of the last topics we'll cover in the immune system. Our learning intention is to understand, first of all, how allergies occur, and we're going to look at the role of mast cells and a protein called an immunoglobulin. We did touch on that, just another name for an antibody, and how they are involved in the allergic reactions. And we're also going to use pollen as an example. Again, it's stated in our study design to cover that as our particular example to use. So we'll cover the basics of how that works also. So an allergy is defined as a damaging immune response by the body to a substance, especially a particular food, pollen, fur, or dust, to which has become hypersensitive. And so the ones that we often talk about, pollen, grass, eggs, nuts, insect bites, you can see things like fish and shellfish as well. But they're normally harmless. So not everyone will react to these. And that's why they're known as an allergen, because they aren't particularly harmless to everyone. But for some reason, these particular ones are ones that people can become hypersensitive to. So what causes an allergic reaction? So first of all, an allergic reaction is broken up into two distinct phases, and they're known as the sensitization phase and the reaction phase. And it occurs when the body becomes reactive to a particular allergen, and our body reacts as if it's a threat. And it relies on all the processes we've been talking about, such as antigen presentation and B cells and antibodies, etc. So we're going to break down those two phases and go through how they work. So the sensitization phase is when allergen is encountered and engulfed by a dendritic cell. So you can see here we've got our allergen, and it's going to be engulfed by our dendritic cell. And we know that when they engulf it, they break it down and present it on the exterior of their cell. And they then become an antigen presenting cell. And it's going to go and activate a T helper cell. And so that's a specific T helper cell. And that T helper cell is then going to be using cytokines to help activate a B plasma cell. And then the B plasma cell starts to make particular antibodies. Now, the antibodies in this case are specific, and they're known as IgE antibodies or IgE immunoglobulins. And what these antibodies do, which is unique to this, is they actually will bind to the surface of a mast cell. And they obviously stay there. And that's the sort of the first part of our reaction. So now this mast cell is primed, or it's sensitized against a particular allergen. So the second phase, or the reaction phase, is when the same allergen is encountered by a mast cell which has those antibodies attached. You can see here that this is a mast cell that has those IgE antibodies, and the allergen will actually bind to one of those antibodies. Now, what this causes is the mast cell to become activated, and we know that mast cells release histamine. And so this mast cell is going to release histamine, and that causes things like the dilation of blood vessels, inflammation, mucus secretion. So that's actually what causes the common symptoms of allergic reactions. And that's what we see when someone has an allergic reaction. We see the swelling, we see the watery eyes, etc. So pollen is exactly that. It's caused by that process we've just looked at. It's when the body recognizes pollen as a substance that our body needs to fight off as a threat. And we start to make those IgE antibodies which bind to mast cells. And then again, when the pollen is encountered, those mast cells become activated and release histamine. So the symptoms that we might see, well, in a mild reaction, you might see something like hay fever, wheezing, inflammation, watering of the eyes and nose. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the much more severe symptoms. So things like anaphylactic shock, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain. So you can sort of see that depending on how the reaction occurs, you can have sort of low scale to higher scale reactions. And obviously all of these things are just caused because of that excess release of histamine by mast cells. That's why we often take antihistamines to try and stop some of these reactions, such as hay fever. So in review, there's the two distinct phases. We've got the sensitization phase and the reaction phase. And it occurs when those mast cells become sensitized with IgE antibodies. And then when we come across it again, the particular allergen, those histamine are released from the mast cells, and that causes those common symptoms. So for today, we just need to know about the sensitization and the reaction and use pollen as an example of how that occurs. Hope this video helped. Thanks.